Okay, tēnā koutou katoa, kia ora everybody. Welcome to today's Q&A. Glad you could join us from wherever you are. My name is Thomas McGrath. I'm a consultant with Wright and I'm also the manager of the training team. And I'm really looking forward to having a conversation today with two lovely people from Wright. So today's Q&A is hosted by our platform Wright Online, which is an online library of amazing micro-learning videos to help you become a better communicator. You can watch them at your own speed and when you like, and you can get in touch with us for a free trial to see if it's going to suit you. So let's introduce our panelists. Our first one is Lynda Harris. Thank you very much for joining us, Lynda. Lynda is the founder of Wright and our Chief Executive. And for many years now, Lynda has worked with plain language in New Zealand, internationally, and with just about any type of organization you can imagine. So Lynda, thanks for joining us. And where are you joining us from, Lynda, just so people know?
Oh, a long way away from you, Thomas. Not really, Wellington.
Okay, and our other panelist is Megan Bennett. Thanks for joining us, Megan. Megan is one of our newer team members at Wright, but she's no stranger to plain language. So Megan joins us as a language expert and teacher, and also as an independent plain language consultant with her own background and years of work with plain language. So thanks very much for joining us, Megan. And where are you joining us from?
I too am in Wellington, and quite a muggy Wellington actually. It's pretty warm here at the moment.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. It's nice. One of those nice summer days you can leave the doors open on, which we love.
I hope people believe us. The people who don't live in Wellington. It's true.
Yeah, it is true. It is true. We can all vouch for that fact. Okay, so thanks everyone for registering for the Q&A today and for logging in. We really appreciate your support, and we're really interested in giving you a good experience here today. So if you do want us to answer your questions, there's a function down the bottom of the Zoom panel there that says Q&A. You can type your question in there, and then in the half hour, which I'm sure will go very fast, we'll do our best to answer your questions, and you can hear from our panelists. So here we go. We're going to get into the first question now, which is, I think it's worth for us defining what plain language is. So I'm going to ask both of our panelists just to give some thoughts about for them what plain language means, and then we'll go into what it means for you and your business, and even bigger than the business. So Lynda, can you tell us what do you define as plain language as?
Sure, it's the perfect first question too. I think I've got a definition, like the official definition, but I'll tell you what I think plain language means to me. So for me, writing in plain language means using any technique really that's going to help me communicate as perfectly as I can with my reader. So when I said any technique, that means far more than just words. And that I think is the biggest fallacy of plain language, if we might address that right up front, that people think it is just about words. So here's the official definition from the International Plain Language Federation. And there are some really key words in this. So a communication is in plain language if it's wording, so there's that one. Structure, so the way it's put together, and design are so clear that the intended readers, so it's all about the reader. And I think that's where one of the fallacies, another fallacy pops in, where people might think it's dumbing down. You write what your reader needs at whatever level that might be, so that they can easily find what they need, understand what they find, and use that information. So that's available right out the International Plain Language Federation.
Awesome. And so this is plain language is an international movement, isn't it? It's not some small little hobby that we do in Wellington. This is a big deal.
Look, it absolutely is. And if you do go, we should put this in our notes somewhere, go to the International Plain Language Federation website, you will see that definition in multiple languages. And it's just so cool to see it there in Dutch and Spanish and Japanese and, many languages. So it's good.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
I think it's worth mentioning as well that sometimes we'll talk about plain English, and that's when we're talking about plain language in English. And sometimes we'll use the term plain language just to talk about writing plainly in whatever language we're using. Megan, how would you define it? Or are there some things that come to mind when we say plain language that you always come back to?
When people ask me, my go-to sort of definition is a shortened version of what Lynda's just said, basically. I say it's information that the reader only has to read once to understand and then act on. And I'm just trying to get it through fairly concisely. So if I get further interest in that, I get a bit of a head nod, and I might add in that we use specific techniques to get that. For example, you know, we use our magic words of verbs. So we like a good strong verb, or we aim for shorter sentences. And I always like to just pop in that layout. A user-friendly layout is also part of plain language as well. I think people don't sort of realise that as well. That can help. Yeah.
Yeah, I think a really big part of plain language is really the intent, isn't it, to write for your reader. And if you are writing with that intent, then it's about choosing the right techniques, like you mentioned, Lynda, that fit your purpose for that audience. And so it's really important for us to always remember that there's someone at the other end of our letter or our email or our board report, rather than thinking it's kind of just us sitting there in a vacuum writing to no one. So yeah, really, really important. And also I really like the points about layout. It is easily forgotten, and it's not just about the words. So let's think about business. And when we say business, we don't just have to mean, we can mean government organizations, we can mean not-for-profits. This is anyone who is dealing with a service or with clients of any nature. So any organization, this can help you. We really want to focus on what are the benefits here of using plain language, and make a case for why you would want to adopt speaking plainly. Lynda, can you talk through, you've seen lots of different organizations go through changes with plain language. What for you are some of the biggest benefits that people can have for their business or organization?
Oh, yeah, it's a big one. It is. I think if we ask the question, why is plain language good for business? If we swapped out a couple of words and said, why is good communication good for business or good for an organization, then it's actually really, really obvious that, yeah, it's not just good, it's an absolute necessity. And I think when we look back over history, you know, we recognize that it has been the greatest communicators who have changed the world, who've brought people along with them, made things happen. And, you know, really it's no different inside an organization as well. But people just don't tend to recognize that. One of the little quotes that we've got in our book, Rewrite, we said, quality writing is one of the most important determiners of business success, but its importance is least likely to be recognized. So we just take it for granted. We can talk, right? We can write, but the quality is what makes all the difference. But to give you some tangible examples, I guess one of the things I often see is that plain language both saves money and makes money. So if we want to bring it down to something like that, something countable and tangible, that's what it is. And another thing we try and get across is that every document or piece of content comes with a price tag. So that's salaries, that's time, and then it's also the consequences. That's part of the price. Those consequences may be great, so it's a business case and you get the answer that you want, or they might not be good. And so if you don't pay attention to writing quality, writing style, you can waste a lot of money, create a lot of frustration, and risk loss of clients, loss of trust, loss of reputation. So the flip side of that, of course, is that when you get it right, you can create amazing efficiencies. And this, I think, is something that if we could just broadcast that one thought, you know, I know as a quick example, one document that we worked on years ago now was, it was a form, and it was for a government organisation. They had a 100% error rate on the form. So of course they were spending a huge amount of time and salaries with people having to answer questions and go back and help fix them up. So that saved something like $1.5 million over a year in time and salaries. So that was one document. And not every document is going to save us that much money or make us that much money, but the potential is there. You also, of course, get happy clients, happy stakeholders, and ultimately happy citizens. And the reason I say that is because so many documents that where there is such a need for plain language, that's a lot of government documents where people are applying for things. And then also a lot of legal documents, contracts, financial documents, KiwiSaver documents, all of that sort of thing. They affect every citizen across New Zealand, and they need plain language. So I don't know, did I actually answer the question?
Yeah, definitely.
All those benefits in there, it's like a must-have.
No, that's huge. And I think, Lynda, that's testament to, you've been dealing with plain language a long time, and you see the results after that kind of time frame, and seeing so many different organizations apply it and get benefits from it. And they're not just, and we'll get into this a little bit later, I think, about how broadly this can go, how big can the benefits be? And I think they can be on an individual level. It feels good to be heard and to know that you're communicating clearly. You've outlined some of the business or organizational values. Megan, what are some of the things for you that are wins for people, in organizations? If they adopt a plain language or a clear communication approach, what do they get?
Just building on from what Lynda said, and efficiency is the thing that I think of first. If there's a lot of, toing and froing, that can be with unclear communication, then that's quite a time waster. And yeah, time is money. Another big one for me is connecting with your customers or the organizations that you're working with. And when I say connecting, that comes, yes, you're having that empathy, and you're connecting and I'll point this out, in quite a genuine way. I think that's really important, to be genuine about it, because I think, we're all customers as well, and we know when things aren't genuine. And I think when you connect with people through clear communication, you're not hiding anything, you're building trust. And if your customers or the people that you're working with are, have confidence in you, that, don't feel like you're hiding anything, or, if you own up to any mistakes you make in a really genuine way, say sorry in a genuine way, then I think that's what we're looking for nowadays. We want that connection. So, with that connection, you're having, you're using your empathy, but you're also getting, you're looking as if you're trustworthy. And I think that connection thing is really important. So a happy customer with a great connection between you is always going to be good for business or any sort of organizational work.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the thing, I like the point that you make about empathy and getting to know your customers, because to write in a clear style, you have to know what your audience are going to need. So you have to be thinking about them, what their needs, and you almost have to not obsess about them, but you have to make who they are a core part of what you do. And if that's separate to what you do, then your organization is going to be difficult. So I think that it's not just about how you write, it's about how you think about the people that you're dealing with, isn't it? And then your communication should reflect that. And I think it's heartening as well that there is a way to do this. There are techniques that you can use to make sure that you're thinking and planning and writing clearly. And I guess that's where we come in. There are things that you can do to get these amazing results. Hey, everyone that's watching out there, I just want you to remind you this is an interactive Q&A. So if you've got any questions that you want to let our lovely panelists answer, you can stick them at a question that you think would be a juicy one. Pop it in the Q&A function down the bottom of the Zoom link there. Okay, let's talk about some real examples where we've seen plain language work. So we've talked kind of in general terms about why it might be good, how it can benefit your business. But let's see where the rubber hits the road and talk about some times where, Lynda and Megan, you've seen people genuinely benefit from a plain approach. Megan, you did some work as a plain language consultant independently. Can you talk us through, is there a particular story for you that resonates when you think about a big effect of communication?
There's quite a few. But I think one example I'll give you, it sort of builds on that efficiency thing. I used to work for a small business, a conservation fieldwork company, and we did large-scale conservation contracts throughout New Zealand. So we worked with a range of stakeholders, iwi, hundreds of property owners, DOC councils, community groups. So we had to gather a lot of information, which meant we had to communicate quite clearly with these stakeholders. We then had to, I had to pass that information through to our field team. And our field team would move through large areas of land and we'd get a real flow. And if any unclear communication happened between stakeholders and me and the field team, things would just grind to a halt because we needed consent to work on the land and etc. So it was absolutely important to be crystal clear with all our communication. And I used plain language for that. We also had to build trust within a community. And, you know, we're going onto people's land, so we have to really be trustworthy. So I found that being clear and using plain language for that worked beautifully. I'll just give you a short example of an email I thought worked particularly well. We needed access to a large forestry block for our field team to work in, and it was notoriously hard to get this, to even, you know, forestry managers are busy people and we're just a thing on the side. So I thought, okay, let's have a try. I thought, well, what does a forestry manager need? What does this manager need to know to feel that his forestry will be safe with our field team in there? So I put it all into a nice logical order, but in bullet points with some nice headings. I threw in a couple of images just to help. They worked better than describing, you know, it in words. I sent it off, and that afternoon I got an answer back, something to the words of, wow, wonderful, clear communication. Thanks very much. Come and get the key. And apparently that was a first. So
what you want to hear, eh?
Yeah, it was really quite neat. And the manager was stoked. So it meant that that flow could continue. And to be honest, that was just one of hundreds of nearly thousands of interactions that that plain language just came through, and always as a winner. Yeah.
Awesome. That's a cool one, Megan. Lynda, have you got a story that sticks with you about delivering value? And then we'll go to a couple of questions that we've got coming through.
Yeah. Again, yes, so many. One that comes to mind is we were working with an NGO called Manawanui who help people with disabilities use available funding to hire contractors who would be their helpers. And so they had the funding, but the way that they had to hire, they had to use a contractor agreement, which caused all manner of difficulties, I believe, and it was written in very legal terms, etc. So they asked for help to rewrite it. So and the whole point of it was that it be able sort of serve as a foundation document to create trust and transparency, and everybody knew what everyone was doing. So we did that, and it did seem to be quite a game changer from what I hear. So I remember one piece of feedback was that someone saying in the past, when they gave they'd chosen their contractor, they gave them the agreement, and they always felt they had to say, oh look, please go away and get legal advice and just make sure that, you know, that they're happy with it, which of course was a big obstacle to the process. So this feedback was that they didn't have to do that now. You know, the contract was halved in size. It was really easy to understand all the key points there, and they were able to do it themselves. So that one was a very satisfying outcome, I think.
That's awesome, because sometimes people have the misconception that some information is just out of access for them, isn't it? Yes. And it doesn't have to be the case.
No, exactly. Yeah.
All right, we're going to go to a couple of
plain language.
Sorry, Lynda, you go.
I was just going to say, plain language is so empowering for the individual, and that is very much about why plain language is good. You know, like for the world, it's good for people.
Awesome. Okay, let's go to a couple of questions. So thank you, Colette. Colette's asked a question about technical documents. So Megan, you've got some expertise in technical writing. I wonder if you could just give us some thoughts here on this one. So Colette says, what about technical documents with technical terms? I see some things written that have lost their correct meaning by being put into plain language. Is there a response you give to that question, Megan, when the difficulties of technical writing?
Oh, I guess really just make sure that you are explaining it correctly. And I think to do that, you might have to really put in some extra work, put in quite a bit of work, go to that subject matter expert and really get that curiosity going and ask the right questions. Obviously first of all, consider the audience, you know, and if they will know the term. And if not, yeah, I'd really put the work in to be able to drill down and get the meaning. Try and define it as concisely as possible. And then I'd probably go back to that subject matter expert and just test it out with them and see if they were happy with it. Yeah.
Nice one. That's cool. Now we have another question. Lynda, I wonder if you could answer this one. We have anonymous attendee. I think that's not their real name. How can I convince my SLT to use plain language in our organisation? Lots of our customer-facing communication is clear and friendly, but that's not what happens when with our internal policies and emails. What does an organisation do there, Lynda? That's a tricky one.
That is a tricky one. It's something we've worked with a lot though over time. I guess the way I think of that is that you really need to build a little business case, and that people are convinced by actually seeing a negative outcome. Also, one of the things we suggest that people do is to work out the consequence cost. So we talk about the production cost of plain language. That's your time and your salaries and income, whatever else you might, you know, in that, but also the consequence cost. And depending on the situation, you might get that from interviewing readers, from interviewing other writers, from tracking a process from the birth of a document through to its, you know, it being used in an organisation. If I could put in a plug for our book Rewrite, which you'll find on the right site, that the whole first section of that really addresses this topic, and I just don't have the time now to go right into it, but it's all about helping people recognise what the task is, and being able to measure and give them some evidence and get together a little business case. Even a tiny little bit of information can make a big difference. So,
and I guess that goes to show some people perceive it as a nice to have, but really it's a key part of any business, isn't it? And it's when it's working well, like you say, it saves money and makes money.
Yeah, reader feedback is very powerful. If you actually just literally talk to a few people, ask their permission to share, or even if they don't want to do it anonymously, it is often a real eye-opener and quite astonishing for people to hear what others really think about something. So, yeah.
Awesome, thanks, Lynda. So we've got another question here about from Jeff Binney, and he's asking about are there any tips for encouraging plain writing in a regulatory team? It's a government department. So much of the written communication is written in a very obtuse style, which generally protects the writer without providing clear and concise information to the reader. Is that, I mean, that's something we deal with a lot. What would either of you say to Jeff in that situation? Megan, do you want to just share some thoughts there, or Lynda, whoever wants to go first?
Well, I'm never short of something to say.
Oh, Lynda, get into it.
That's okay.
Go ahead.
Fine.
I think in that situation, it's more than just about the writing. It's actually about the culture. It's about the way that people think about writing, about what they think their job is. And so that really requires some real team discussion, I think. Sometimes people think that their job is just to deal with the legislation and deal with it very matter-of-factly, and they have to use that wording because that's what the regulations say. Whereas others will go, but we're talking to human beings and they need to understand, and we're trying to get people to act here, and so therefore we need to write in a different way. But really, I do think it's about getting permission to and agreement across a group that, yes, this is our job. Let's look at what we're trying to achieve. How do we need to write and interact to be able to achieve that? And I think a lot of progress can be made that way.
Awesome. Any thoughts, Megan, or are you happy with Lynda's response on that one?
Pretty happy with that one, yeah.
Nice. Okay, so we've been talking quite generally about plain language and that it's really effective, it's really good. And what I think it'll be helpful now is to return down to an individual level. So I'm interested for both of you, what would your top 3 tips be for individuals if they wanted to write themselves in a more plain style? What can people at home do to begin with? So Megan, can we start with you? Top 3 tips.
Top 3. Well, if you're just starting out, I would suggest just don't try and do everything at once, basically. Take one principle a week even, say focus on structure 1 week and maybe then build on that. So the week after, think about, okay, adding informative headings. And then certainly don't jump in and try and do, jump into your active and your passive and your hidden verbs and things like that all at once. Maybe just focus on one thing a week. I'll go back to empathy. Just have empathy, and I'll just add my favourite word, genuine. Just be genuine about that empathy. And one thing that I always think is quite important is remember that we are crafting information here. We are actually using our skills to develop this reader-friendly language, and I think that's really important to remember that. We're not just writing down simple words and short sentences. This actually takes some work, and to be honest, I think we're creating some magic. Yeah, it's a craft. Yeah, we're using our skills.
Yeah, and it's there's that old quote about
Mark Twain.
I didn't have time to write. I've sent you a long letter because I didn't have time to write.
Exactly.
So there's a lot of skill and effort really to create documents that are reader friendly. And I think the good way to think about it is that we need to do the hard work for the reader so that they have an easier experience, because we, by our very definition, are trying to communicate something to them. So we want them to understand. So we need to do that work.
Yeah, exactly.
Lynda, what are your 3 tips for those who are watching?
Okay, I think I'll take an approach that these tips would be useful for someone who knows nothing about plain language at all. So the first tip, it's really almost like all 3, but is to think about who you are writing to. What do they need from you? How do you need to connect with them? Thinking about the person, and we used to always talk about putting yourself in your reader's shoes. That will change what you do. Even if you spend 1 minute thinking about it, that'll be the best investment. And then the other 2 things that flow out of that are to organise your material in a way that is really helpful to the reader. Tell them what they want to know up front. They don't want to read that whole thing. Maybe they will if you start well, but upfront messages are really important. And then the last one is just to use clear, familiar language. Don't introduce the jargon. So most people can do that without knowing anything else about plain language.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. Okay, so let's finish on a final point about some of the bigger benefits of plain language. Megan, I remember you saying one time that you believe that access to information is a human right. And so this is a big mission that we're on. What keeps you going in that mission?
Yeah, just that I do believe access to understandable information is a human right. If we all pay our taxes, so we've got a right to be able to understand IRD's information. If we get pulled up by the police, we've got a right to understand what's going to happen next. And I think that's what drives me. The wider good that plain language can do, not just for businesses or organisations, but for everyone. A good example is the Citizens Advice Bureau website. They use beautiful plain language, and I think it's a great asset for New Zealand, really.
Lovely.
Yeah.
And Lynda, what keeps you going after the years you've been with Plain Language? What keeps you coming back?
I think it's that plain language affects so much more than just the organisation that is putting out the document. So just off the top of my head, just thinking about rewriting letters for outpatients, hospital outpatients, so they know where to go, what to do, what to take, and are feeling less intimidated. That's not about the hospital, that's about the patient. Rewriting pharmac information about medicines for people, it's not about pharmac. It's about, again, it's about people. Climate Action Toolkit, another fantastic project that was written for the benefit of businesses or organisations to think what they could do to minimise their impact, you know, on the environment. There's just so many examples of wonderful examples where plain language has been applied, and yes, the organisation benefits, but the far greater benefit is to people, to individuals, and that's what gets us going, I think, and we'll continue to do that.
Awesome. And it's fun, right?
Yes.
Okay, well, that's all the time that we have today. Thanks very much, Lynda. Thanks very much, Megan, for taking the time. And thank you to all of you that have registered and joined us for the webinar today. So just a reminder that if you're interested in learning more about plain language, you can visit us at write.co.nz. You can find out more about Write Online, which is our online library of learning videos where you can get heaps of top tips to help you be a good communicator. And in general, just keep in touch if you're interested. So all the best out there, keep safe, keep healthy, and we'll see you again soon.
Thanks.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.